afternoon, everyone. I'm standing up here after a bunch of powerhouses, so let's see how this goes. But I've got my notes, so we're all okay. So when I was asked to do this talk, I was given the topic, and it was finding your voice and your path. The first thing I said to my friends was, oh my gosh, they want me to talk about finding my voice. And my friend says, you have no problem with finding your voice. You clearly have no problem with projecting your voice as well. But I had reminded them that I think they wanted me to talk more about finding my inner voice. So I'm going to try to touch on that a little bit. But in all honesty, I also had to really do a bit of self-reflection on this topic because I guess in some ways I've never really stopped to think about what drives me and what my inner voice even sounds like, or really breaking down the steps that brought me along this path to where I am. I feel like I'm a little bit like a bull in a china shop. I kind of tend to have a goal and I just run towards it, and I just have my blinkers on and I'm very focused and I'm very driven. But it was nice to actually have to sit and think a little bit about, what are these influences and where do they come from? And I do acknowledge some of them in general, but I think the first thing we have to all acknowledge is to find your inner voice. It really begins with the outer voices that you hear as a child. Those voices that help to actually form your thoughts, that influence you at a point when you maybe, you're just coming into the world and really learning about the world around you. And for me, there's a couple of very influential characters in my life, and they're my parents. My mother would be the most influential, and appropriately enough at a forum like this for me to celebrate her and speak about her. Because as a young child, maybe when I was about 6 or 7 years old, I remember she sat me down and she said, Asha, if we can only educate one child, it'll be you. I have an older brother. She said, because society, he's a boy, he can be a garbage collector and he can find his way to the top. It's fine, society will help him. But society is not prepared for you. I want you to stand on your own 2 feet. And of course, at that time, I was thinking, what an absurd thing to say. I was standing on my own feet. I wasn't using anyone else's feet. But because I was just too young to really understand the gravity of her words. But subsequently, with time, as I've got older and maybe a little wiser, I've definitely got more gray hair, I think to myself, the power of her words, the confidence that she gave me, and just the knowledge that, I was really valuable. That was perhaps the first time she differentiated that there may be differences how the world sees my brother and I, but that didn't mean that was going to stop her from seeing me the way she did. And I felt valued. And I think that value helped me to grow in self-value over time. And then, of course, my mother's dream of making sure her daughter stood on her own 2 feet wouldn't have come to fruition if not for the support of my father. Now, we do come from a very patriarchal society. There's no doubt about it. My father's a South Asian man. But he always said to the two of us, my brother and I, he said, I can't afford to give you much, but if I can afford to give you anything, it'll be your education. Nobody can take it away from you. This is the gift I'll give you. And he kept his word. And I can tell you my family has made massive sacrifices to ensure that both their kids got an education and got to live the lives that we live right now. So collectively, they said to us, do your best, do what you love, and you'll do it well. And I think the fact that my parents never put constraints on me, they never told me what I should do because that was their dream. They said, do it, go forth. When I said I want to be a marine biologist, they're like, go for it. They had no idea what I was doing. They didn't know what marine biology was, what it entailed, but they said, okay, that's what you want to do, we'll support you. And that was a huge thing because they didn't put constraints. They didn't put me in a box. So for me, my life was absolutely limitless. And I could be free. And I think that was really the most important, most empowering part of the start of my journey, and that's what I've carried throughout my career. And truly, just knowing that these two people who are very heavily influential in my life, you'll see me with them at all times as much as I can be, because I'm extremely grateful to have them in my life. I knew I was valued by both my mother and my father. I knew that I mattered, that I was equal, that they believed in me, and also that what I wanted for myself mattered to them. And I think that's quite unusual, and I'm obviously very grateful for that. So at the same time that I'm being empowered by these words, I'm also young enough to start dreaming. And, you know, when I was very young, around the same age, I started getting these National Geographic magazines, and I flipped through these pages, right? And I'm thinking to myself, wow, like look at these people, they're doing these incredible things. And that's when I started to dream about becoming an adventurous scientist. I wanted to go places no one else would ever go and see things no one else would ever see. And I would look at these characters in these magazines, beautiful glossy prints, and I would see these faces and I would replace them with my own. And I was young enough at the time to not see that all those faces were people from North America or Europe. There was no one who looked like me. But I didn't know the difference, and I didn't care, frankly, because I was going to insert myself in those pictures, and that's what I was going to do. And I definitely have, which I'm very thrilled to say. But then on this path, I also fell in love with water, and you know, there are a few people in this room who've known me for a very long time. I'm a swimmer. I'm an absolute water baby before my career as a marine biologist. And so, you know, marine biology seems like this natural path. It's very adventurous. It's science, it's really cool science. You can ask questions and you can go down these crazy pathways, try to figure out what the answers are, and it involves water, right? So for me, these three essential elements thrown together. And then at 18, I'm super excited. Now I'm telling everyone very proudly, I'm going to be a marine biologist. And I have all these aunties and uncles come in saying, Ane puta, but what are you going to do with this degree? So I'm thinking, I mean, I live on an island. Doesn't that seem like the most natural job? If you live on an island, you work with the ocean, right? Like that, to me, like, so I was like, I'll carve my own niche. And they were like, anyway, that means you're going to go abroad and you're not coming back, no? So I was like, that seems like a ridiculous assumption, you know? I was like, I mean, I'm going abroad only because I can't study marine biology in Sri Lanka because it doesn't exist, but I will come back and serve my country. Because I don't want to go live in some other country and give them my expertise when I can come back to this incredible, beautiful tropical island and be part of something that creates something that doesn't exist. So for me, I was resolute in that fact, that desire to come back and live in this country and serve and watch, just change what happens on the ground here and take Sri Lanka to the world. And that was a very, very early dream for me. So of course, now this dream exists, and I have to try to fulfill this dream, which is always, you know, that's the second lot of challenges. As you pause and you take a deep breath and you're like, oh crap, now I've told these aunties and uncles I'm going to do this. Now how am I going to do this, right? So I go off, I went to university, I went to Scotland, obviously, you know, beautiful but grey and dreary. But I did 4 years of marine biology, so my degree was in marine biology. I was quite focused on that, as I said. And then at the end of it, I thought, okay, well, I have all this, this theoretical knowledge. So now I want to apply this knowledge, right? What does a real marine biologist do? It's not just about the books. So I thought, okay, I better find a place to do volunteer work. And I couldn't do voluntary work in Sri Lanka because the field didn't exist. So I decided then to find a country that was empathetic enough to let me come in, because as a Sri Lankan, we all know visas are a classic hurdle in our lives, and I needed to go somewhere where they would allow me to come as a volunteer with spend about 6 months with no real set out path. And so New Zealand has a great conservation ethic, and they were very welcoming, and I got a 6-month visa. But then, of course, the next thing was, okay, now New Zealand is far. So now I had to find money to get myself to New Zealand. So then I went in, because I was still in Scotland finishing my degree, I started working in potato fields. So I would dig rotting potatoes out of potato fields to make money, so that I could then earn enough money to buy my flight to go to New Zealand to become a volunteer. So I'm very proud I get to New Zealand. My parents, I will tell you, they are obviously very supportive, very liberal, very open-minded. But of course, they were really nervous when their daughter decided she was going to take a backpack and go to New Zealand. Back in the day when Wi-Fi didn't exist, okay? So they couldn't text me every day or any of that. And they were like, well, you know, is this a good idea? I was like, well, I have to do this. I knew I had to do it. I had to take this chance on my life and go and just expose myself to something. So of course, they gave me their blessings. Of course, I went. And I get to New Zealand, I realize I don't have enough money to actually live in a structure. So I lived in a tent for the best part of 6 months. I worked on research projects, voluntary research projects. I've got great tent stories as a result, so I mean, I have no regrets whatsoever. And then when I was living in this, so one of the promises to my parents was that I would email them. So email existed. I'm not that old, but so anyway, but dial-up email. So yeah, okay, so it's quite old, right? The dial-up internet, you all remember, no? You go, you pay some money. It's this big block computer, and it goes, and you're waiting for the damn email to come. So anyway, so I would write to my parents, and then one day I got an email from an old professor from my university, and he said, there's a whale research vessel that's going around the world, and it's stopping in the Maldives and Sri Lanka. He said, why don't you try to get on it? So I thought, okay, that's it. I told you, I'm very focused and very committed. When I want something, I'll work for it. So then I wrote to the owner straight away, and I said, my name is Asha Divorce. I want to be a marine biologist. I want to study marine mammals. You have this incredible yacht that's going through Sri Lanka. Would you be able to give me a place as a volunteer? And then, of course, I had to go back to my tent, get on with my life, come the next day, check my email, and there was an email from them. And I was amazed, right? So fast. And it was like, thank you for your email. We're sorry we don't have any space for you. So I was like, right, this is not going to work for me because I clearly want to get on this vessel. So I wrote to them every day for 3 months until they let me on board. But let me just say, they might have been a bit nervous that I would never stop, which is probably, well, they have admitted that was part of the thing. But the other thing was also, I just want to point out that I wasn't being a spoiled brat through this whole process. I wasn't writing and demanding that I have a space. I was just saying, I was bargaining, that the whole time I was telling them what I could bring to them, like what I would be willing to do. I literally said, I'd do anything. I would do absolutely anything. Let me on. I said, can I work with you in Sri Lanka? Then they were like, well, no, we can't. It turned out that there was actually a Sri Lankan man who was blocking me from getting on board. Surprise, surprise. I've had plenty of problems with the same individual in time, but I think my work has shown him that he has not really hindered anything. So that's okay. But so then I worked, I basically, chatted to them, and I'd send these emails, and in the end they said, okay, fine. If you can be on the vessel in 24 hours in the Maldives, we'll give you 2 weeks in the Maldives. So they must have thought, sure, she's not going to turn up. Stupid. I packed my bags. I was in the Maldives in 24 hours. And I think they were just like, oh my God, she's arrived. Now what do we do? So anyway, so that was, and they said, okay, welcome. Yeah, you'll be the deckhand. So for those of you who don't know, a deckhand is a person who basically cleans toilets and polishes brass, right? And cooks meals. So I was fine. I was really happy. Everyone else is like, what? But you wanted to be a scientist. And I said, no. But my thing was, if I could get on the vessel, then I could prove to them. Now they're trapped. No, they have me. They can't get rid of me. They can't toss me out in the middle of the ocean. So at that point, I felt I can prove to them that I could be a scientist, right? So it wasn't just about, life is not a free ride. And I'm sure all of you know that. Things don't just, frankly, I tell people, I'm so glad that my life has had these ups and downs. Because if I stood up here, I wouldn't be standing up here if my life went to school, went to university, got a job, won an award. Nobody would want to hear about my story. Right? So your stories get way more interesting the more challenges you face. And I think we have to learn to embrace that a lot more. So anyway, I did end up working on this vessel as their deckhand. In 2 weeks, I proved to them that I was an asset. I worked hard. I would polish brass really bright, clean the toilets so they could see their smiles in it if they looked into it, whatever it took, right? And then I would still do science jobs. So they gave me science jobs as well, and I became their science intern as well. So I was really happy. That was my first appearance on the internet back in the day when you couldn't put yourself on the internet. It says deckhand and science intern. I was really proud of myself. But the point is, I managed to convince them that I had this skill. So then that's when I first saw the blue whales around Sri Lanka, because they kept me on for the 6 months in Sri Lanka. And that's really when this big adventure started, right? So that was in 2003. And I wanted to, at that point, obviously start I wanted to start the science on these whales, right? Because I discovered them, and that's a whole story in itself, which I'll tell you on another occasion. But the point is that I suddenly was like, okay, like I have this opportunity to create something great, right? So I wanted to rush into it. So I started writing to scientists who'd worked with whales in other countries, and I would write and say, hey, you know, I've discovered this population of blue whales. There's something unique going on. I want to do some research. I think it's going to shatter what we think about blue whales in general. And these foreign scientists would write back and say, this is amazing. Can you go get us a research permit so we can come and do the research? So I was like, please. This is what I call parachute science or colonial science, right? Where Western scientists come to our countries, they do work and they leave, and they get all the glory and whatever, and there's no sustainability, there's no training, there's no development of the people in the country. So we don't gain anything out of it. And here I was, this was my discovery, this was my idea, and they were trying to take it away from me. And I was like, there is no chance you're going to do that. I'm going to show you that our countries have absolute talent and capability. We just lack opportunity, but I will change that. So that's what I proceeded to do. I waited 5 years until I earned enough pocket money to start sitting on boats in exchange for talking to tourists, and trying to kind of develop the proposals a little bit. And then, you know, things kind of rolled along. And the project has grown, and it's been 10 years. So 10 years this year is the anniversary of my Sri Lankan Blue Whale project. We've done amazing things in terms of our discoveries, but then I've also established Ocean Swell, which is my non-profit, through which we do marine conservation research and education. And, you know, it's great because, you know, the world is now recognizing. I'll tell you, the world recognized the work a lot earlier than Sri Lanka recognized the work, which, as you can imagine, is also not much of a surprise. But it's quite nice to be honored in Sri Lanka itself. That, to me, is sort of the greatest honor, when your country actually recognizes what you've been doing. But so when I tell people these stories, and this story goes on, obviously, because it's been 10 years and so much has happened, but when I tell people this story, everyone turns around and goes, but you're really lucky, you know, you found what you wanted and you just did it, no? And I'm like, we all had a dream as a child. We all have had desires in our life. And we are all born into situations. Luck is what we create every day by the decisions that we make. And I could have stepped away a long time ago. I can tell you, this job doesn't make me wealthy. I definitely don't have a flash car. In fact, I don't have a car. I drive my mother's car. But the fulfillment I get from the job, and I knew the fulfillment would outweigh anything else I could gain from working a 9-to-5 job in the corporate world, which doesn't suit my personality or my lifestyle. I knew that people would pay me to do the kinds of things that other people are killing themselves to earn money, to save up their holidays to do. And to me, it was a no-brainer. So it's not, luck is not something that just like falls out of the air. You do create your own luck. And you might want to argue with me on that, and you can. You're open to your own opinion. But the point is, we make decisions, we take choices, we take risks and sacrifices in our lives. And for me to start a field that didn't really exist in a country that doesn't really care about this part of didn't really care about our oceans, was a huge risk. The fact that I wanted to come back was a risk. But it didn't matter in the end. But I can tell you, you know, my story sounds rosy. If any of you have been following, particularly this year, it's been like this spectacular year that I've had. I've won all these awards globally, locally, and all of that, which is amazing. But I also try to remind people that's a culmination of more than 3 decades of work, right? So it doesn't happen overnight, and that's the perspective we have to gain as well. That things take time. Persistence pays off, hard work, patience. The first time, you know, I wanted to have a meeting with a minister. It took 12 years for one of them to call me and say, actually, we need to have a conversation. I'm like, it's taken you 12 years. I've been knocking on your doors for 12 years. I used to sit at meetings, the only person with the knowledge that I had in the room, and they would look at me, and then they'd turn around and ignore me and go back to what they were doing, because I was too young and too female. I want to remain too young and too female for life. That's okay. But now they've had to learn that they need me, and that's what you have to become. As a woman, we do have to work hard to prove ourselves, much harder. It's very unfortunate, but I can tell you, you need to work hard enough that suddenly they need you. You become such a necessity that your gender doesn't even matter. And that's what we need to strive to be. So I always say I strive every day not to be defined by my gender, but my capabilities. But I use my gender to empower others by letting others see themselves in me. That's really important to me. Because I think my strength can sometimes become someone else's inspiration. And being relatable is the key to empowering others. So I want people to see me for who I am. I want people to hear my stories and know that this is the true me. And, you know, and there have been down periods. Okay, I can tell you the most significant was when I was just before my 35th birthday. And I remember I was in California, I was doing my postdoctoral research. I remember for months I would cry. Because for some weird reason, I started letting the outer voices get too loud. I started judging myself on what everyone else wanted me to be. I was looking at myself and going, oh my God, I'm 34, I'm not married, I'm single, I have no kids. Looking at all my friends' photographs on Facebook, worst place ever when you're depressed about these things. My God, flipping through and I'm like, oh my God, she's had a third child. I was like super like flat, right? And I was like, what is the point of my life? What am I doing? What am I contributing to society? I'm not even fulfilling my task as a woman because that's what women are supposed to do. And I was in a terrible state, right? So I'm all alone, I'm crying. And I'm looking at the things that I own in my life, and the most expensive things I owned was a surfboard, a bike, and a computer. Actually, to be fair, that's all I still own, but that's beside the point. But the point is, now it's by choice. Then it was because that was it. And I thought, this is my life. And so I actually did the most important thing I've ever done for myself at that point. I decided to take care of myself, which I assume many of us forget to do fairly often. And my choice for taking care of myself was to go off on a Vipassana retreat. Now, if you don't know what a Vipassana retreat is, it's 10 days of meditation, 10 hours a day, no reading, writing, speaking, or eye contact. None of my friends thought I would survive it because there was no speaking for 10 days. That was not the hardest part, I can tell you that. But I'll tell you, it was definitely one of the most important and most fulfilling things I've done for myself, because I managed to learn to quieten those outer voices. I started to hear only my inner voice, because when you're 10 hours a day on your own, there's nothing to distract. So it's those inner voices that come out. And you gain perspective. I started to really look at my life and think, what the heck I've done? And at that time I'd done a pretty good amount of work already, and I was like, yeah, come on, this is good. And lots of other things, like, for example, so one thing is it reinforced the fact that you have to make space for your inner voice. Because if you're constantly in a place where you're hearing outer voices, you can't listen to your inside. And that's really detrimental for all of us. So we have to learn to find comfort in our own time. And I know most people don't believe me when I say this, but I actually am an introvert. So I'm a classic extrovert. I can see Shiromal smiling at me. I'm not going to look at her, but I'm a classic extroverted introvert, okay? So I am very gregarious, I can be very social, but after a day like this, I need 2 days to recover, because I get my energy from the inside. So I tend to take a lot of time for myself. But people get very confused when I say this, and that's fair enough, I totally understand. And then I also learned that I have to strike a good balance between my work and life. I know we all talk about work-life balance. Does it exist? Is it a myth? We all have our own perceptions on it. But my perception on it is I think I have a pretty good work-life balance. I find it very important. I do sport. I'm very athletic, so that's my kind of balance. And then I tell people, I make sure I train in the morning, and then I work, and then by 6:30 I'm done with work, and then I either spend a bit of time with friends, or I spend time with my family. Those are very important things, or alone. Women are my worst critics in this. They love to turn around and say, oh yeah, but it's easy for you to be fit because you're not married, you have no responsibilities, you have no children, no. And I'm thinking, this is rubbish, okay? Because, first of all, don't make assumptions. People might be single for various reasons. People might have no kids for various reasons. So it's very unfair for us to make assumptions. Be responsible for your choices. You made a choice to have children. You made a choice to be married. You be happy in that. But don't judge me on that. Don't put that on me. Right? And it's true, because it frustrates me. Right? So we can't make excuses, right? If you're unhappy, that's your unhappiness. You deal with that, I'll deal with mine. Thank you very much. And at the end of the day, I also turn around to people and say, look, my work is for the sake of humanity, regardless of background, gender, age. So I may not have my own kids, but if I don't look after this planet, you won't have kids who have a healthy lifestyle. Your kids will have no planet to live on. So your kids are my kids. So stop judging me for not having my own children, because I'm looking after not just my non-existent kids, but all of your children. So I got a couple of last messages. I can see she's approaching the podium right now. But so obviously for me, finding my inner voice has been this whole journey. I mean, I also, you might see me running, sometimes talking loud to myself, so that inner voice sometimes emerges. My running friends actually call me the podcast, because I love telling stories, so I do like talking. But I'm clearly a very passionate individual, and I believe very strongly in living the life that I want to live. And I think that's what we have to all learn, is we live in a world of constraints where people tell us what we should be or how we should live or what we should do. But that's their life, no? So in the end, you're the only person on this one road, right? So if you're not happy, and if you're not finding that joy, and if you're not doing the stuff that fulfills you, you're going to be lying on your deathbed. And someone else talked about a deathbed earlier, and I was like, I also talk about deathbeds. I think the same thing. I think when I'm lying on my deathbed, I want to look back and go, yep, not a regret. I've done it all. I've served humanity. I've served the world. I've served my oceans. I've lived that mission. And now I'm ready to go. And that's how I want to feel. And I think you can only really get yourself to that point if you truly live that life where you are finding that fulfillment within yourself. And so I obviously love to live in that limitless space outside the box, right? I'm not an in-box person, and I want my life to be useful to more than just myself. Okay, so I want it to be not just like, I get lots of joy out of my life, but I want it to be more than just that. So I'm going to wrap up just with, there was this message I put on my Facebook, and it's been circulated so many times, and I want to put it out there again, because I know a few people in the audience today alone have said how much they appreciated those words. And I'm just going to sort of read out an excerpt from that. Because we are all, in some ways, we are influencers. We are people who are nurturing that next generation of voices and that next generation of heroes. And we all have a responsibility, even if we haven't found our own voices and our own paths in the way that we'd really like to, we have a responsibility to make sure that that next generation has the opportunity and knows that we're standing by them and allowing them to do it. And seriously, this is what I wrote. School is not the be-all and end-all of life. I was a student, I was a pretty good student, never won a class prize, ever. I won sports prizes all the time. And I don't think I'm a bad student. I was just not driven by this whole system of memorization that our education system loves to celebrate, right? But school is not the be-all and end-all of life. It's just the beginning. Work as hard as necessary and have fun in school, because it's the portal through which you step. Once you get through school, you have the freedom to control your own destiny. Today, I only do things that I'm truly passionate about. I'm always pleasantly surprised when I get these award letters and things like that, because the award is not my end goal. Change is. Always remember, who you were in school doesn't determine who you'll be in life, and who you are in life is really up to you. So I'm going to ask all of you to dig deep. We all have an inner warrior. Release that inner warrior. Live with passion. Have courage. Seek to serve. There's a lot of fulfillment in serving. Be driven by the beauty of life. Believe in the goodness of humanity. Take time to learn who you are and know who you are. Grow your heart. Surround yourself with love. And absolutely never give up. Thank you.